Hey, Lynn, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. Now, would you mind just introducing yourself real quick to those listening?
Sure. I am Lynn Smith, a recovering morning news anchor. I was a morning news anchor for 15 years, NBC, MSNBC, and most recently CNN Headline News. And I saw journalism changing a lot. Didn't feel my contribution was moving the needle forward in the way that I wanted to. So I wanted to take the skill set that took me from being able to be on camera for that long and connect to the lens and things like that and help entrepreneurs, experts, business owners articulate their message through the lens, whether that's in the media or if it's in a sales call.
I love it. And let's just dispel one thing right now that,
Okay,
like, is
please.
that a natural, I know, is that a natural talent though? Like being in front of, I feel like we
No, I'm
used
so
to
glad you
watch
asked
news
this.
anchors. Yeah, news
Yeah.
anchors growing up, and you'd be like, wow, they're so good at that. They just must be so good at that naturally. What goes into that, preparing yourself?
But Shannon, don't you also look at some of them and you're like, oh my gosh, that is so bad. Ah, that's so bad. And that was
Yes.
me. Girl, it was so me. I had my first news director say to me, like, you're never gonna make it in TV. Like,
Wow.
don't even go for it. Because it's not a natural born skill. Now, are there people that have like that it factor and that charisma? Absolutely, yes. And I think that that's needed for if you become, a TV news anchor. But it is 1,000% a learned skill to be able to connect to the camera, talk to the audience, feel like somebody's talking to me, not at me. That's when you know somebody's really good. And there is such a big like differentiator between a really good news anchor and then when you turn it on and you're like, oh my gosh, somebody take them off TV. Like this is just not good. Because it's a learned skill.
Yeah. What do you think the factors are that make somebody charismatic on camera or able to connect really well? Like, what is it that they get across, or what is it in them that really does go through the screen and reach people?
It's such a good question because I actually coach now executives to do this because this is the exact same thing for when you have to present for an investor or if you have to present for a client. It's all the same. You have to be able to look through the lens and make sure that it feels like I'm talking to you, right? I want you to do this the next time you're doing a Zoom call, everyone that's listening. Picture the face of somebody when you're looking into like that black hole, because when you're looking into a black lens, it just feels unnatural. Picture someone's face and picture the emotion that you want someone to feel when they hear you speak. So, when I was telling a really difficult story, which I covered a lot of challenging stories, I'm having to explain to the viewer at home that this is serious. And then I have to make the transition to sports and I have to adjust my energy. And then I have to go to a kicker that's like a feel good, warm, it just gives you all the feels. And did you see how you see that range? And it's because I'm able to visualize the emotion associated with whatever I'm talking about. That skill set, yes, that helps if you're going from top story to a tease that kicks off a commercial break. But the same thing is true when you're a business owner and you have to have somebody on the other end of that table or lens feel why they should invest with you, whether it's buying your product or whether it's giving you money or whether it's just taking another phone call with you. They have to connect to you. And that's the key to really good communications.
Yeah, and that's where it bleeds into the sales concepts and how entrepreneurs really need to be able to communicate well with their audience. One of the other elements I've seen is using language that's approachable and using language that they understand, that your audience can understand, because I feel like a lot of people are experts, but have trouble articulating what it is they do to the person who isn't a fellow expert. This is something we all
Yes.
struggle with. How do you help people navigate that?
Yeah, which here's what's very funny. I'm horrible at sales. So I can communicate all about how I can help you. But then once it comes to like, but you have to pay me for it, I'm like, yeah, let me just give you something for free. Which my team is like, no, 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 no. I am doing sales for you because it's not in my nature. And I think it's such a unique skill set. And when sales is done well, you know it, right? Like you've been on those calls where you're like, I need this so bad. And this person clearly can solve the problem that I have. And then they don't deliver on it. This happens so often in the business world. And it's so frustrating as entrepreneurs because we invest in this person that says that they're going to solve our problem. In a lot of cases, they just have really good salespeople. And
Mhm.
so authenticity, I think, is the most important thing. Like I've invested more in those that are selling to me when I ask the really tough questions. that is not just like, okay, you have a great sales pitch, but what's your conversion rate? Some of these questions and they're like, listen, I'm going to be honest. It might not be that I'm going to be the one solution. You might have to look to your email funnel. You might have to do that. Authenticity and honesty, I think, is way more important than if you're able to close a sale. It's going to
Yeah.
be in the long term what sets your business up for success, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I would challenge you in saying you say you're not good at sales. Maybe at the close, but I think the sales process actually
It's
80 to
close.
90% of it is the trust factor and is the
It's
authenticity.
so
And
true.
that's when they actually buy. And then it's just a
Mhm.
matter of swiping the credit card and
That's
executing the
right.
transaction. But they've bought in through what you're saying. They literally buy with their credit card when someone asks for the money. But I actually think that 90% of the importance, like you said, is what happens before that.
That's exactly right, which is why most of the times I'm on the call. And then I hop off and was like, yeah, my team will take it from here. And so I'll do a
I love
sales
that.
podcast or a little education online to get a little bit better at it. But I admit to that. And this is also something I really encourage for executives and entrepreneurs. Say out loud what it is that might not be your biggest strengths, and don't try and pretend to be good at everything.
It's
Like,
okay.
it's okay.
Like,
And people actually don't want you to be perfect at everything. It's really annoying when somebody
yeah.
online is like, hey, I quit my 9 to 5 and now I just made $100,000 in 3 hours while I was on vacation. And I was like, BS, BS. I totally call BS to that. And there's so
Yeah.
many, this space, like it
Mhm.
sets up unrealistic expectations for entrepreneurs. And they're like, wait a second, I'm just trying to crack my first million. Why
Yeah.
isn't this happening for me? And it's because people aren't being real.
Yeah. And, it goes back to the communication aspect of it where you're seeing these results, but you're not seeing how they got it or what they
Yeah.
used or what tools. And then they typically also gatekeep that. They'll say, like, you have to pay me for my secrets or something. And I always don't trust that, where I go, information is in abundance and basically should be free. And then how you apply it is where the value really gets delivered. It's all in
That
the
is so
application and the customization to what you do. And that's why I think that when people are, communicating their value, I go, yeah, overshare information and educate people to the extent that you can for free. That's my philosophy. And then say, would you like to apply this to your business and have me help you put it into action? Here's my invoice.
And here's the reminder for everyone, and you're making such incredible points, is that there really is only one you. There's
Hmm.
literally no competition in just that. So there can be a million, like when I first started my business, I only did media training. There are a
Hmm.
million former news anchors that do media training. But there's only one way that I do media training. And that's the thing that you have to be able to convey, is that,
Yeah.
yes, there's many people who are former CPAs that can give you this information, but there's only one you that can give it the way that you give it, which is why I
Hmm.
love when you start your show and you're like, hey, we're the ranch dressing for those veggies, those numbers.
Yeah, well,
Like,
that's a good point too. I was just actually unpacking this last night as I was writing some copy for my marketing, and I was realized something that I said, I'm a CPA. We're a dime a dozen. Like, there's probably a machine that cranks out CPAs, and it's like, what makes a tax return different than the next one, right? Like, talk about standardization and trying to articulate your value. And I said, my difference is I'll read it to you in your own language
mm,
and I'll explain it to you.
I
And
love that.
and that's the key thing that I think that gets missed a lot, is like, my why in what I do is what makes me different, because my why is, it should be a birthright that you understand this stuff. It
Mm,
should be. It should be taught like ABC 1, 2, 3, you know, deposits, withdrawals, and taxes. Like, that should be
mhm,
the basics that are taught, because it faces all of us every day. And it drives me insane that people don't know this, not out of judgment, but out of the fact that no one's teaching it and nobody is making this a standard part of what we learn. And that's part of my why. And I said, then
mm.
I'll take this in my own hands and I'll teach it the way it should be. And and as we're talking about communicating and having that authenticity, I said, showing up with that and showing up with that language, like, hey, I'll explain it to you like this, really does make a difference. I think if a CPA can differentiate themselves in a very commoditized world, like, anyone can.
That's going on a t-shirt for you. That that's your tagline.
Yeah.
This is something that I have found to be one of the greatest struggles for entrepreneurs, is
Hmm.
they are doing so much work saying why their product's so great, but they're
Hmm.
not talking about, as you point out, why they created that product. So I don't believe I don't believe people buy your products because of your products. I believe they buy it because of why you created them. And if you can articulate that why, that is your differentiator. That is and in my programs, I call it your uniqueifier. It's the thing
Hmm.
that only you have done, are doing, or will do. And if you can't articulate that in a clear and concise way, within like 45 seconds, like we don't even have the 2-minute elevator pitch. Give me a hook, give me the reason, button it up, like give it to me in a soundbite of why you do what you do, which you just did. That is going to enhance your business in ways that you cannot imagine. You've spent so
Hmm.
much time on all of this copy and here's my product and it's great. Here's 5-star reviews. No, why are you doing this? That's what people buy
Right.
into.
Yeah. And, it goes beyond the why did you start your business? It's like, oh, well, I didn't like my 9 to 5, or I didn't. It's not about you. So it's the why in the form of the service, right? Like, why does this
Yes.
serve the public? Why does this exist, and what problem does it solve? Because when we talk about the why, I think a lot of people go to, well, I want to provide for my family, I want to quit my job, I want to have flexibility. And I'm like,
Very
that's not what
different.
we're trying to. Yeah. So let's just
Yeah.
unpack
So
the difference between those.
let me give you some examples. So why do I work with CEOs? Well, my father gave up a position as a CEO because of his fear of public speaking. I inherited that fear of public speaking, which nobody expected. I was a news anchor, like I was supposed to be so good at this, but the camera's my crutch. I can talk to millions of people through that camera and have zero nerves. You put me in front of 800 people or 80 people. I see their faces. My voice starts to shake. My hands get sweaty. And I write about this in my ebook. I had, I'm assuming I never had a panic attack before, but I had a panic attack in a keynote. But your worst case scenario in public speaking happened to me. And it could have been career ending. It was humiliating. I won't sugarcoat it, but it is now a cornerstone of my teaching. It is how I connect to my clients because they're suffering from the same form of fear that I went through and I experienced it. And I created my program to overcome my own fear of public speaking. I am solving the problem I had. All of that coming back to the why. My father gave up a job as CEO because of this fear. And I was like, I don't want any other CEO to not make the impact that only they can make because of a fear. No, like that's going to be my mission and my purpose. And so if you can identify that and prove that you've experienced the problems that your customers going through and the reason that you know you can solve it is because you solved it for yourself, like that's such a powerful differentiator. And so often we're just focused on our number. What's our number? And yes, we all need our number to be great, our revenue. We want that number to be amazing. But what is also the impact that we're making? Right? Like
Mhm.
what are we serving and what is the end result as a that we can point to? That I think is bigger than a number. That's what
Yeah.
I look
And
at it as.
adding into that too, what I think a lot of entrepreneurs do though is that they will articulate the purpose, but they'll make it a grand macro purpose that doesn't feel
Mm,
tangible. So when
mm,
you say like, so that no other CEO has to give up their job because of a fear of public speaking, that is very specific. But if you say to have everybody be better at public speaking, I go, that why? To do what?
right.
To
To
make what
make
impact tangibly? Like, how will
Mhm.
this actually affect someone's bank account, life, family, experience, health, whatever it is, like in a literal way? And people are fearing specificity, I find, because they're just
Mm,
trying to help everyone with everything and they're not getting down to that real nitty gritty why
yep.
and really articulating that. Do you agree?
If you market to everyone, you market to no one. So yes,
Exactly.
I completely agree. And I will add to that. I think that people are really lacking the depth and they're afraid to get vulnerable, right? So I could be afraid to admit that I have a fear of public speaking and I had to overcome it. I mean, I had to hire a keynote coach. I had to do all of these things. I could have pretended like I was really good at everything. And I think there's a lot of people that might argue that in there are people out there that will trust you more if you don't have flaws. I disagree. I think that the reason that CEOs open up to me is because I share that story and they say, okay, here's what I'm terrified of happening. And I can coach them through it and they trust what I'm saying because I've experienced it. So if
Yeah.
you are holding yourself back from that, I would just challenge you to really, as you point out, be specific. And my core belief, and I end every single one of my keynotes this way, is I say, I just want you for a moment to picture what the alternative is. If you do not do what you're afraid of, what's the alternative, right? And so some of those answers are, well, I'm stuck, or I stay the same, or da da da. And it's always, courage is so much easier when you consider that alternative. So if you consider you're just going to stay where you are if you don't push through that fear. And I know we'll talk more about fear, but it really is. I just want you to think about that if you're listening to it. Think about staying where you are if you aren't happy. Now, if you're thrilled and you're happy, that's totally different. But if you aren't completely satisfied, consider that that's the alternative to you not pushing through fear.
Yeah. And on that subject of fear, I want to talk about the common fears that come up and why people resist. Because it sounds so simple. The way you're putting it, it's just like, yeah, this makes total sense. Why aren't we actually doing it? Because I feel like the advice is circulating constantly. Be authentic, show up this way. You know, like you said, we're getting all the coaches in the world, the keynote coaches and all this stuff, but we still get in our own way. We still get in our own way of that success and of communicating effectively. And you were touching on this idea of fear. Talk to me about the fear that your clients are facing and how we label it, though, because I feel like how we think it's showing up and how it actually shows up can be different.
That's right. So, what shocked me is hearing quotes about overcoming failure and pushing through fear. This is age old, right? From Michael
Mhm.
Jordan, that he missed more shots than he sunk. And I mean, I could give you thousands and you know them. You've seen them, you've seen the quotes. I've posted things about it. And here's what shocked me. I've coached hundreds, if not thousands now, experts, entrepreneurs from the startup level to billion-dollar companies. They all had the same fear because I ask each and every one of my clients, what are you afraid of? And I encourage you, if you're listening, ask yourself that and then say out loud what those fears are. And what shocked me is every single one of them have a version of a fear of failure. And I'll give you some examples of what those versions are. What if I say the wrong thing? And listen, the stakes are high for some of my clients. We're talking about CEOs that might go on a major cable news show and their stock price is going to move as a result of every single word that they say. So that's a real fear.
Yeah.
What if I say the wrong thing? What if I sound stupid? Which I've worked with a lot of doctors and their communities, their peer opinion of each other is very important. And they're afraid of not seeming smart. Can you imagine being a doctor and literally in some cases like curing cancer and you're afraid you're not going to look smart? It's all a version of a fear of failure. And so I had the same thing. I feared that the worst case scenario would happen, which is I freeze on stage and I look like a complete idiot, which happened. And so I needed to create some sort of methodology in order to overcome, which is that voice in your head. It's not the actual reality. It's the voice saying, God, you're really going to screw this up. Or what if you sound stupid? Or why does anyone want to hear from you? It's that voice that is the root of imposter syndrome that I've coined your brain bully, right? It's like that
Mhm.
voice that's telling you you're not good enough. And sometimes your brain bully is not just in your head, it's out of your head and right in front of you. It's somebody like my news director that told me I was never going to make it in TV. So that voice is so incredibly powerful that all of these messages that we're getting from everyone that's been so successful telling you fear is going to be your fuel, which I tell you that failure is going to be your fuel, that failure is one step closer to success. For some reason, it's not resonating. And it's because that internal or external voice are seeking of external validation, which an entire social media multi-billion-dollar business was built off of. How many likes do I get?
Mhm.
Is challenged when we focus on internal validation versus external validation. And I created a methodology to overcome your brain bully that I teach in my programs. When you overcome that brain bully, because you've done it, not because Michael Jordan told you to do it, but because you've taken control of that yourself, then you see real actionable change. And I'll just give you one example. I recently had a client that was having a major, huge, big interview. And I got on the phone with him and he was like, the brain bully didn't even have a chance to get in. That was his language. The
I
brain
love
bully
that.
didn't even have the chance to get in. And I was like, it's something that can be tangible. And I think this is why it works. It's tangible enough for someone to do something with it rather than just hearing, well, Michael Jordan says, or,
Yeah.
Brene Brown says, or insert every major name in business that says that our failures are okay. No, you need to take control of that voice. And that's really, I think, the key to unlocking what it is that you want, which is, I don't want to feel afraid of this. I don't want to be afraid of failure anymore. I'm sick of it. You are, but you have complete control of it as well.
Yeah, and some other advice I've heard too, I can't remember where I heard it from, was to act like you've already been canceled. Like it was something like, because on the other side of getting canceled, I know of some people who have been quote unquote canceled,
Sure.
and they're like, my life didn't change. I also know people who have
Yeah.
gone viral and their life didn't change. So I'm like, if you don't live in the extremes, if you don't allow
Yes.
yourself to dip into those extremes of celebrating virality or, beating yourself up over getting quote unquote canceled, it's like, this too shall pass, both sides,
Yes.
because you're canceled today, and then tomorrow there's new news. You know this firsthand,
Mhm.
that okay, they're gonna celebrate or talk about you for like 2 days, and then they're on to the next thing. I mean, look at the last 2 weeks.
Oh
I
gosh,
mean,
don't even
I
don't
know
get us started. Well, the news cycle in general, like
the news cycle is so fast,
everyone's looking for the next thing to
right?
like sink their teeth into and to
Right.
dissect. And
Yeah.
here's how I approach that, because I do a lot of crisis comms.
Mm,
And here's the reminder. As long as you feel that you are being honest, true to yourself, and you truly did not do something wrong, which also can happen, and that's human. And depending on the scale of that wrong, we mitigate the admission of a mistake, and that's an important piece of it too. But if you are canceled or go viral for something that is just a part of sort of the sick way our cycle works right now, as long as you're true to yourself and you don't feel that you did something really wrong, or maybe I would have done it a little bit differently, you can still stand in your authenticity. You can still stand in what you feel is your right. And I'll give
right.
you an example of this. I actually haven't shared this publicly. I recently went viral on Instagram because I posted a seemingly innocent, I didn't even think of it. My 5-year-old son like gave me this ring that he found, and he's like, "Will you marry me, mommy?" Like, he's 5, right? And I
Yeah,
thought
that's
it was like
adorable.
cute and adorable, and I was like, posted a sweet thing. It was like, so sweet about my son, and I was like, hashtag pray for the girl that thinks she's going to marry him, and it was a
Yeah,
total joke, but did not realize that there's a very real sensitivity to monster in laws, did not realize that there's an entire like Reddit world of boy mom, like crazy things. And in hindsight, like, I would not have made the joke, and I decided to take the post down because clearly it was way different than what. And I initially was like, "Whoa, guys! Like, this was a total joke, seemingly
yeah,
innocent." I've seen other people post similar things, but it hit a nerve. I was like, you know what? This is not worth it. And it's an important lesson, I think, to entrepreneurs, and why I'm sharing it. I could have, and I went to a lot of people in my inner circle, which if you're an entrepreneur, hopefully you have a board of directors. Those are those people that you just go to in many business decisions that maybe don't have a formal role in your business, but you just use them as advisors in situations like this. And I sort of got two answers. And one is double down. Like, you've got 4 million views on something, like, capitalize on it for business, da da da, da. Or take it down and, say, guys, sorry, I'm really sorry. That was totally not how I intended this to come across. And
hmm
I made the decision based on my family, not my business. I was like, I don't want that out in the universe, even though I know things exist everywhere. But I made that decision. And I think I'm great. I'm happy. I did not have anything tragic happen. but it
No.
didn't feel great. And so when there's nothing I could have done to have known that it would have struck the nerve that it struck. So it happens. If you live in this constant state of avoidance because you're afraid of something like that happening or a version of that happening, think about how much you aren't doing that could be beneficial for you because you're really
Yeah.
coming from a place that's really good. And that's
Also, yeah,
that's why I
you're
share
not,
that.
and you're not like, you're not still like under the covers crying over this. Like you're like, I took the
I'm
post down
good.
because I'm not emotionally attached to this, so I'm gonna take it down. I'm the same way where I'm like, clearly y'all are emotionally attached more than I am, so whatever. You can,
Yeah.
I'll take it down. I don't care. This was a
Life
stupid
moved
ass joke
on.
made in passing and whatever.
Exactly. And
And
life
I
went
would
on.
I would emotionally detach from it, not stand my ground or have any ego about it, and then probably just let it go. And the cool thing is that like everyday entrepreneurs though are not posting the thing, not doing the thing out of the fear
Yeah.
of what exactly happened to you happening to them. But guys, she's standing, she's right here, she's fine. It's like they're not going to take you down, burn everything to the ground. It's going to be probably 48 hours of, ah, shit, oops. And then we move on.
And if the worst case happened, like I'm a worst case person, right? So anytime I analyze things with clients and we're dealing with really, really high stakes situations, I go to what's the best case scenario and what's the worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can live with the worst case scenario, then we take action, right? So I did this when I started my business. I was a news anchor. I didn't know how to work an Excel sheet. I had no business running a business. I had no idea, but I also knew if I didn't shoot my shot, that I was going to be in the place that I say is the alternative, and that wasn't okay with me. And so it's like if I looked at this decision and said the best case scenario is that this is a great business, right? Like thumbs up, I can feed my family. Worst case scenario, I crash, I burn, I try and find another job, right? Like those were my two scenarios. I could live with both. So just make that decision based on those two questions. And
Mm-hmm.
in I would say 100% of the time, but I'm also in the business where it's 99.9% of the time.
Yeah.
You'll be able to live with it. You'll find a way
Yeah.
through. That's what we
And
do.
it's like it's that whole philosophy of the 100% of the shots you don't take, you miss. And it's the same thing of like, you know, you're living in your worst case scenario by not doing
Yeah.
the
By
thing
not doing it.
because
Oh, that's so true.
you can't go into the negative. You can only go back to zero most of the time. But I'm like, you're at zero. You have nothing to lose most of the time when you're taking these risks. And I see people all the time, like you said, fear of failure. One of the biggest ones is quitting your job and starting a business that I see all the time. People are waiting, they're analyzing, they're overthinking. And I'm going, you're literally living in your worst case scenario because what happens if you don't, if you don't quit, you're here. And if you quit and you quote unquote fail, you're back here. You don't
Yes.
get bumped back. You don't go negative. You don't lose years of experience. You don't become less valuable. So what do you have to lose? And yet people are still fearful.
Yes. And you have to have a really good plan. So I think where
Yes.
people make a mistake is they're like, "Great, I'm quitting my job." And and then they sit down and they're like,
Now
"Okay,
what?
now I'm going to start a business." And they Google like LLC. And okay, not what I am advising.
Yes.
So if you are in that place where either you just made the leap or you're thinking about making the leap, really do it in a very, very smart way. Have your foundation built
Yeah.
before you burn down the teardown.
Learn how to use
Like
Excel.
learn how to use Excel would be a great start. Tap into a CPA so that someone knows how
Right.
to do your books. Like
Yeah.
start building the foundation before you make the commitment so you know what you're getting into, you know what you're going to service people with, what your products might be. Spend some time cultivating the foundation of your business before you take that jump. But if you are just not taking it because of the fear on the other side of that, then you make such an amazing point of you're living your worst case scenario. Like I say,
Yeah.
consider the alternative. The alternative is the worst case scenario.
Yeah. And,
So genuine.
people live in fear, call this fear of failure, right? That we have. And failure shows up differently for everybody.
Hmm.
And actually, I think a lot of times people will admit they have a fear of failure. But when they describe failure, I go, that's not failure. That's like a
Mm.
missed attempt. Like you didn't fail, you get another life in the video game. Like you didn't, game isn't over. And I think there's a difference though. They said they have a fear of failure, but I go, there's a difference between, again, losing one life in the video game and game over and restart. But even then, the game doesn't blow up in your face and you have to go buy it again from the store. And even then you can do that. I feel like people are always assuming this permanence of failure,
Mm.
or they're treating it
Mm.
with permanence.
And that's probably why every single person that I asked, what are you afraid of? There was a fear of failure. So there's
Mhm.
some narrative that we are given throughout our lives that we've got to get it right, that
Yeah,
we've
one
got to
shot.
make we've got one shot. We've got to succeed. We've got to, especially now, I have 2 young boys and I'm dealing with this when it comes to competitive sports and all of this. And I'm like, I was at my son's soccer game and he was the goalie and it was like the championship game. They're 8. And a mom comes up to me and she's like, oh my gosh, like to be the goalie's mom at the championship winning game. And I was like, we're good. Like if he doesn't win, which they ended up not winning, I actually get excited as a parent that I can teach him something because the
Yeah.
life lesson of because the life lesson of being able to endure and overcome failure is way more important than the trophy that he would have had on his bookshelf that he wanted so much more than losing. So if
Yeah.
I as a parent can teach that, which is, I laugh sometimes because I sit him down and I talk about how I got cut from every team, and then my husband's always like, okay, motivational speaker. Because
Yeah.
I do in parenting, I try and be like what I am when I'm coaching my clients. And if you're an entrepreneur and a parent, like we need to change this narrative, not just for ourselves, but at an earlier age, because
Yeah.
then it won't be so hard to change when we're later in life.
Yeah, and my husband and I both kind of follow this same philosophy. We're both grateful that we took so many L's when we had stamina
Yeah,
to get back
that's a
up.
good way of putting
We
it.
took we took so many L's
Before
when
our
we
knees
could.
started cracking.
Right. Took so many
That's
L's
good.
then, and I say L's build grit.
Yeah.
W's build egos. And that's what, and I actually would take the L's any day of the week. I don't have kids yet, but when we do have kids, I always say like they're going to be like, it's like Sarah Blakely. You heard that story about her dad where she would come to the dinner table every night and her dad would ask, what did you fail at today? Every day
Mm-hmm.
at the dinner table. So what did you fail at today? And if they copped out and said something, he's like, no, like, what did you really fail at? And then someone would say like, oh, I didn't make the cheerleading team. He's like, awesome. Good for you.
And do you know, I guarantee that's how she got the mindset. She just posted something recently that
100%.
was like, it is completely crazy until it works. And then she
Mhm.
showed the prototype of Spanx and it was pantyhose with feet cut out. And she was like,
Yeah.
every single lawyer, person, human told me, you are absolutely insane. And it's like,
Yep.
you're insane until it works. And that's
Exactly.
a learned behavior. You learn that and either you learn it from a
Yeah.
mentor or you decide that you're going to take it upon yourself to make that change, but just know that it's clearly a learned behavior.
Yeah, and she also articulated too that, I mean, her job before she started Spanx was selling fax machines door to door. She goes, talk
From her.
about talk about asking for the L's, like just asking to be like
Everybody
verbally
says
smacked in the
no.
face. And
Yeah.
and I have to mention this, a woman at that. So let
Mhm.
alone the fact that it's fax machines door to door. But
Yeah.
like it's also a woman probably selling to men in offices. And she basically had every excuse to say, well, this isn't for me. She had every excuse to say this isn't for me and I need to choose another career path. And she was like, nah, I'm going to take the hit and keep on coming. Eventually this will work. I wish more people adopted that mindset. And I do think that had to do with the embracing of failure. Look what it did. And like, yet we hold ourselves back from embracing that ourselves.
Yeah, and you pointed out earlier, like sometimes people make too broad of a promises so that you can make an
Mm-hmm.
impact. The way I articulate it is like so that you can make the impact only you can make. And just imagine the world that we lived in if each and every one of us truly believed deep down inside there was an impact to be made. And then we took the action to make that impact. Just imagine, like, it's mind blowing how much more positive the world would be. And this isn't Pollyanna, and I'm not trying to like make this seem woo woo, but it really is significant. Like, if you just spent every single day thinking to yourself, what am I going to do? Maybe sometime that's just doing something really kind for someone else. That moves the needle. That changes the surroundings. You might not have created $1 billion company that transformed the way that women wear clothes, but you've made an impact that only you can make. And that's why she's such a shining example. And I
Mhm.
think that I really truly believe like she has a purpose on this planet and she's using it. She talks about these things all the time for good reason. She wants a little girl to hear that, or grown girls to hear that and say, like, tell me no. Go ahead. Come on. Tell me no
Yeah,
again and
bring
again
it
and
on.
again. Like, bring it on. As entrepreneurs, if you have not survived a massive failure and you have not crashed and burned, like, I'm sorry, you're not at the table yet.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
it's like a badge of honor.
Mhm.
Embrace it. You have to go through it.
Yeah. Yeah, and, in thinking about that too we mentioned Sarah Blakely, there are definitely other entrepreneurs that have had this happen to them too, and we talk about, you know, failure being that badge of honor. I look at it as like the calloused hands that can then handle more, and it's really
I love
important that
that.
you can build that up and say, well, I've dealt with this before and I'll deal with it again. The
Mm,
problems are only going to get bigger. So if you know how to solve them at a small scale because they've happened to you, the bigger ones are less impactful at the new levels you hit. So if you can solve $100,000 problems and you attack those problems, I'm like, then you can solve $1 million problems when you get there, because they're pretty much the same problems, just bigger, just more zeros on them. And it's more about, do you have experience in solving this and being a leader to solve it? You only get that through experience. I can say you can read every book on the planet. You will not be ready. We just talked about this with business school. I said business school doesn't prepare you for jack squat when it comes to these tough decisions and
which
failures
makes
and
me feel
coping
so
with
much
failure.
better because I was like, maybe I should go to
No,
business school. And you're like,
nah.
absolutely not. Don't waste your time. You bring up such an important point because I've worked with some of the most successful people, and they have said, and this is a mindset, I love problems. I
Mm,
love problems. Like, I walk into the office of like, what am I going to solve today? That's a complete mindset shift to the entrepreneur that walks in and is like, oh, what
mhm.
problem is going to come up? Ugh, what fire am I going to have to put out? If you approach problems as invigorating because you know that it's moving your business in the right direction, it will change how that problem gets solved and the outcome will be so much better. And
Yep.
so this is something that I really want people to think about, because it's not just I talk a lot about how your thoughts become your actions and decisions that becomes your outcomes, right? So if you are thinking, and this is scientifically backed, it's called the reticular activating system. It's in the back of our brain where our thoughts live. Those thoughts move to the front of our brain, which is how we make decisions and take action. And then that leads to our outcomes. So it's not just like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just following what science says. But if we change that conversation that we're having in our mind from, gosh, what is going to happen today? I just wish I could stay in bed. I don't want to have to deal with any of this crap that's happening in my business. I just want to go back to bed. That's going to affect the outcome, and it's going to be bad. Or if I wake up in the morning and I was like, I cannot wait to solve the problem that is still sitting on my desk from yesterday, and it's going to get solved today. And if it doesn't get solved today, it's going to get solved tomorrow because this problem is mine. That changes your outcome, which the
Mhm.
coolest part about that is you are in complete control of the outcomes of your business. Complete control. That doesn't mean
Yep.
that sometimes your number is going to be zero and sometimes it's going to be nearly 1 million. It's that you're in control of what you can control, which are your thoughts.
Yep. In control of the narrative too. And I was thinking of this
Mm-hmm.
other example that we've implemented. I definitely would have done so after this conversation. It's reinforcing our decision to do this, but we have this reflection because what I've noticed is, and I don't know the science behind it, but I feel like we're hypersensitive to when things go wrong, but we fail to recognize
Mm,
when things are going right because they are on the even smooth road, but we notice potholes. So we're not grateful for the smooth road, but we do pick up and remember when there's really a lot of potholes happening. So what we've done is I've said, hey, I'm going to challenge my team to reflect every single week on what
mm,
wins did we contribute to this week for our clients? What happened that went right? Because that's going to feed testimonials, good marketing, outcomes, and being able to articulate that why and the how that we say these are the results that we get for clients. What we realized was when we were asked the question of, well, what results do you get for your clients? We all looked stone faced going, a lot of stuff, but like, I can't name a lot of things that we've done. But if they say, well, what has gone wrong in the last 2 weeks, I could give you a narrative, step-by-step timeline of every problem that happened. And it's like, you tend to remember what doesn't go right because it disrupts the flow of how your brain thinks it's supposed to happen. But when things go right, we don't care, or we just don't pay as much attention to it because we're not focusing on solving for something. So what I realized was that we need to actually start flipping our narrative to like, what did you do right this week?
Mm.
And then you realize how much it outweighs the wrong, and you start realizing that you're not failing. You're just like, whatever it is, you're 3 out of 4 wins, but you're so focused on that one L.
Yeah. And I think this happened a lot in the news business. You'd have a great
Mhm.
show. And we have a saying like, you're only as good as your last show. It
Mm.
was just ingrained in us. And, there's always something new to pick on. So it's very common in our industry where it's just like, yes, okay, that was a phenomenal show. And now what else can I prove out there? And it was so funny because I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine that's still in the business that is down. And like, I'm a coach to friends too. And I was like, you just had a huge win last week. And she did. She had a massive, huge win. And I was like, you haven't even let that sink in, let alone that's already worn off. And now you're thinking about the thing that's the L and the potential L, not even an L yet, but a potential L. And it was like, that just needed to be that reminder of why aren't we savoring our W's? And how come the dopamine runs off so quickly? And we're just always needing more, 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 and more. And it took a long time for me to shift from that because I was always being told, you're not enough, right? Like, talk more like this, look more like this, cut your hair like this, lose weight, gain weight, like all the different types of criticism you could imagine. And it took me getting outside of that into my own head and business to realize I'm in complete control about what it is that are my W's and L's, like, and how much power I give to each of those. And so you make a really, really solid point of, are we allowing what is going well and has gone well to sit and marinate and celebrate? Such a
And
good
allowing
point.
that voice to match the volume of the brain bully.
Mm-hmm. How much power are we giving that brain bully? How loud is that voice? And then what do we do when that voice comes up?
Mm.
That's the key.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Lynn, this is a great conversation. I could pretty much talk to you all day, but I know you got a lot
Same
going
to
on.
you. Same to you.
Uh,
You've just been great.
Same. So, could you just tell our listeners how they can learn more about maybe working with you or what you have going on so they can find out more?
Sure. You can go to my website, lynnsmithtv.com. That's where you can learn all about the different types of programs that I have. I have one of my signature programs called the Boardroom, which has that methodology of how to overcome that brain bully and communicate in that clear and concise way. And then follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn. I'm just at Lynn Smith TV. I love talking to people. So DM me. I love to interact with fellow entrepreneurs and talk about what are some of our same problems are, because I really believe like coaches need coaches, like individuals, like we are all a part of this club when you're an entrepreneur, and supporting each other is just so very important.
Totally agree, guys. Lynn Smith TV. That's Lynn, Lynn Smith TV. Just thank you so much, Lynn, for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Shannon, it was awesome conversation. Thanks for having me.